and welcome to the next entry in this fall's Book Sandwiched In program. My name is Rebecca Harrison, and I'm the manager of adult services at Central Library. I'm super excited to help out this fall with introducing our wonderful lineup of speakers. I'd first like to start by thanking the Friends of the Tulsa City County Libraries for sponsoring today's program. If you'd like more information about how to become a friend of the library, you just visit our website, tulsalibrary.org/friends. Be sure to also join us next Monday for a talk with Sloan Davis, Associate Professor of English at Tulsa Community College, who will be discussing News of the World by Paulette Giles. If you don't have a link for next week's program, you can email friends@tulsalibrary.org to receive that link. For today's presentation, I'd like to welcome Joe Johnston, who will be presenting on Joy Harjo's Crazy Brave. Joe was born in St. Louis, grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and worked in Cleveland, Ohio, and Dallas, Texas, before spending almost 30 years in Nashville. He holds a bachelor's degree in journalism and a master's in mass communication, both from Oklahoma State University. He is an author, artist, songwriter, and music producer, marketing executive, speaker, and teacher. Joe worked for national advertising agencies before founding his own successful Dallas marketing firm, working with accounts like General Motors, Pizza Hut, and Whataburger. As a songwriter, music producer, and publisher with a Grammy-winning album to his credit, he has contributed to sales of over 15 million albums on 7 different record labels, working with artists like Vince Gill, Waylon Jennings, George Strait, LeAnn Rimes, and Marty Stewart. Joe is a member of the Will Rogers High School Hall of Fame alongside such notables as Leon Russell and S.E. Hinton. Joe is proud of his Native American heritage and enjoys hiking, gardening, and horses. Please join me in warmly welcoming Joe Johnston.
Thank you, Rebecca. I appreciate that. Thank you, Laura, our technical genius, and thank you, Rebecca. And thanks especially to my friend Cindy Pryor McDonald, who invited me to participate today. I appreciate all of you being here to have a sandwich with me. And we're going to have some fun and hopefully learn a little bit about Joy Harjo and Crazy Brave. It's an honor for me to be here, and it's an honor for me to talk about Joy and her book. So thank you very much. Joy Harjo, in August of 2019, became America's Poet Laureate. And I'm sure you know that that is the nation's official poet. And she has a great responsibility to raise the national awareness of poetry, reading, and writing. So that's what she's doing this year. But my gosh, she has also continued to write and publish. And she's contributed to anthologies. She's been very busy. So she, at the time she became Poet Laureate, she was the first Indigenous woman to have that honor, the first Oklahoman to have that honor. And at the ceremony, she not only read her poetry, but she also became the first Poet Laureate to perform with her own band.
Joe, we are not hearing the audio on that.
Okay. Well, that's unfortunate. I'm sorry about that. Don't know why that happened. Okay. And we're back. I'm sorry. Well, we should have tested that in advance. I apologize. But you saw the picture, right? So that's worth something. We're going to talk about Crazy Brave, which is Joy Harjo's memoir. Is it poetry? Is it prose? Is it an autobiography? The answer is yes, no, and maybe to all of those. It's not like any book that I've ever read, and I think you'll find the same. It's not in chronological order. It's not, I was born, I grew up, and so forth. It's not even
Joe, if
linear.
I can
It's
interrupt you.
circular.
Joe, can you share your screen? I don't think your screen is being shared right now, so we weren't able to see the picture. Sorry to interrupt.
You can't see me now?
I can see you, but I can't see the presentation.
Okay, well, there's nothing else to see right now, but there will be. There will be. So the book is not even linear. We move around in time, and that's because Joy has a different understanding of time from many of us. She understands that what is past is still with us. We need to be aware of what's going on right now, and the future will be influenced by what we do right now. So that's a theme throughout the book, and that's why she will be talking, for example, about being a teenager at home with a drunken father who is threatening, and then all of a sudden she's away at school and having fun with her friends. And it's not like a flashback like we might find in a mystery novel or in a movie. It just flows all together. So we get a sense of all of time flowing together. So I'm going to share a couple of things with you, a couple of visuals with you here. Well, okay, there we go. So this is Joy's story. It's a journey, and we're going to take that journey with her. Let's see. Sorry, I have two computers working here. Let's see if we can get them both going. Well, that one's not going. Well, okay. Give me 1 minute, please. A little technical issue. Thought I had this all worked out. The book begins, the table of contents is a list of 4 directions. And so you have some understanding of that. In many indigenous cultures, the 4 directions are very central to life and to understanding the way we perceive the world. And of course, everybody in America knows about the 4 directions, north, south, east, and west. And as a Muskogee Creek, like Joy would describe the 4 directions, they would be different from, for example, from the way a Lakota person would describe the 4 directions. But so you understand the ones in the book, she gives you some explanation. The east, of course, begins the book because east is the direction of beginnings, the rising sun, the promise of the new day, and new beginnings. The north is the direction of difficult teachers, hard lessons to be learned. The west is the direction of endings and our ancestors. And south is the direction of transformation, migration, and movement. So Joy was born in Tulsa in 1951. She's lived in New Mexico. She has traveled throughout the US speaking and reading, performing with her band, and teaching at various universities. I would like to read a piece that she wrote, the way she describes her birth. Though I was reluctant to be born, I was attracted by the music. I had plans. I was entrusted with carrying voices, songs, and stories to grow and release into the world to be of assistance and inspiration. These were my responsibility. I'm not special. It's that way for everyone. We enter into a family story and then other stories based on tribal clans, on tribal towns and nations, lands, countries, planetary systems, and universes. Yet we each have our own individual soul story to tend. She describes her parents this way. My father was ephemeral. He was about 10% body. The other 90% of him was spirit, and it was often unreachable, even to him. This earth can be difficult and jarring. My father was of the water and could not find a hold on the banks of earthiness. Of her mother, she says, my mother to be was fire. Those of fire move about the earth with inspiration and purpose. They're creative and can consume and be consumed by their desires. So we go through Joy's childhood, and we find her growing from innocence, imagination, joy, and creativity to being afraid, being careful, how to move about the world, because there's a lot of things pushing against us in the world. One of the examples she gives is that we grew up in a time of polio in the country. She says that in her house, everyone spoke softly with trepidation, as if the sound of the word polio would call it into the house. In my parents' tribal traditions, the word is spoken with intent, could call it here. And so we're taught that thoughts become words, and words become actions. And we learn the importance of our words. We learn that words have impact. As she grew up, as she played with other children, I'm sorry, I'm still having technical trouble here. As she grew up, one of her favorite pastimes was to play with bees. And she would whoops, I'm sorry. She would play with bees. She would catch them in her hands and put them on the ground and watch them and make stories about them. This is the father, this is the mother, these are the children. She writes, the bees were very cooperative. They always allowed me to hold them and move them about in my play. They would humor me kindly and then fly off. Then that morning I was startled from my play by the neighbor's alarmed voice. What are you doing? You'll be stung. I jumped. I took in her belief. Then I was stung and I stopped playing with the bees. And that's the way we grow and we learn, and our imagination and creativity and joy is shut down. We learned from Joy's book. She had similar experiences in a church that didn't like her stories, didn't like her imagination, and she was taught not to think about those things. She tells us about playing outside with boys and girls when she was little, and it was a hot summer day and they were all wearing nothing but shorts. She was called in to put on a t-shirt, and for the first time knew shame about her own body. So she writes, who am I to call my enemy? An enemy must be worthy of engagement. I turn in the direction of the sun and keep walking. It's the heart that asks the question, not my furious mind. The heart is the smaller cousin of the sun. It sees and knows everything. It hears the gnashing, even as it hears the blessing. The door to the mind should open only from the heart. An enemy who gets in risks the danger of becoming a friend. As she grew, it became her time to go to Will Rogers High School, my alma mater. And she writes this about learning. I loved the discipline and ritual of learning. There was more territory to contemplate. There were more doors. Where I got stuck was in wanting to perfect what I learned. Instead, we had to keep going, imperfect, from one assignment or set of lessons to the next. There was always something more to know. And who decided what knowledge was important to know and understand? So we see her imaginative, creative spirit pushing against the strictures of education in the Tulsa public schools. But it was during this same time that she began to discover the joy of painting. She painted and became good and became, at a time when her father threatened to send her to a church school, which she really dreaded. She was happy with the Bible. And she writes this. Now, let me ask you, how many of your friends have said they're going to read the Bible and then didn't do it? She says, I decided to read the Bible through. I read it through 2 or 3 times. The Old Testament was basically tribal law. I found wisdom, poetry, and a great respect for dreams and visions. I also found no prohibition on dancing, which was proscribed by my church. King David danced before the altar. On the other hand, she writes, women were as oppressed then as they are in Oklahoma. So fortunately, she was saved from the church school by being accepted to the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe. As you can see from this picture, it's a beautiful place to be. There, she went to school with kindred spirits, other people like her, other indigenous students. They shared their art and they grew and celebrated their native heritage together. During this time, they formed a group that went on tour, and it was one of the best times of her life. It's where she really began to blossom. And she wrote this about being lost in her art at that time. I set out for the painting studio to get myself back together. When I painted, everything went away. The seductions, the sad need for attention, the missing fathers, fearful mothers, and evil stepfathers. I could fly to the moon and to Venus too if I wanted. I knew I could always count on cerulean blue to be absolutely cerulean blue when I spread it on the canvas. So with that kind of joy, she went out on this tour with all the students across the West. And though they encountered racism, with people calling them dirty Indians and telling them to get out of town, she says, we sensed we were at the opening of an enormous indigenous cultural renaissance. The energy crackled. It was enough to propel the lost children within us to start all over again. During the time at the Art Institute, she became pregnant. She gave birth to her daughter, Rainy Dawn. And on a visit to the clinic where she would deliver Rainy Dawn, they asked her if she'd like to be sterilized. Fortunately, she was smart enough to say no, but she found that other girls did not have the language skills and the world experience that she had to be able to say no. And that's the kind of world that Indigenous women were living in. It was after this period, after the birth of Rainy Dawn, or I guess it was while she was carrying Rainy Dawn, that she discovered poetry. And in her poetry, we find her turning to personification. Since she had always considered everything to be alive, all the animals, all the earth, everything we see to be full of life, personification came naturally to her. She heard a poet on television, and it awakened something in her. She met a young man who was a poet. And she writes, the next morning he called up and recited poetry. His poetry opened one of the doors in my heart that had been closed since childhood. And here she says about the English language, I began to understand that poetry did not have to be from England or of an English that was always lonesome for its homeland in Europe. The English language was pleased to occupy new forms. After the birth of Rainy Dawn, she wrote, and this is not the entire poem, I had to participate in the dreaming of you into memory. Cupped your head in the bowl of my body as ancestors lined up to give you a name of their dreams, cast once more into this stew of precious spirit and flesh. And let you go as I am letting you go once more in this ceremony of the living. And when you were born, I held you wet and unfolding, like a butterfly newly born from the chrysalis of my body, and breathed with you as you breathed your first breath. That was your promise to take it on like the rest of us, this immense journey for love, for rain. Joy reflects on her painting when she says, I felt close to my ancestors when I painted. As I moved pencil across paper and brush across canvas, my grandmother existed again. She exists in me now, just as I will and already do within my grandchildren. No one ever truly dies. The desires of our heart make a path. We create legacy with our thoughts and dreams. This legacy either will give those who follow us joy on their road or will give them sorrow. Of her encounter with poetry, poetry becomes personified. The spirit of poetry came to me, she writes, and she quotes, you're coming with me, poor thing. You don't know how to listen. You don't know how to speak. You don't know how to sing. I will teach you. And I followed poetry. I love this promise that she makes to us at the end of the book. May our eyes and ears continue to open and hear and know our ancestors. May we remember the stories. May this story be food for your own. I want to tell you something else that she said in an interview. Poetry is what we turn to in times of transformation, whether it's a psalm from the Bible, a classic poem, or something newly written. Poetry speaks to our history and holds our spirit. It tells us who we are as a culture, as a people. And she says, whatever has been given to me does not belong to me. It's part of Tulsa, part of Oklahoma, and the Muskogee Creek people of the country. For me, this is a book that wears well. Even before I put all these little green markers on it, it was marked and dog-eared all over. I find that it's a book that calls to you. It's a book that wants to have passages reread and have lines remembered. I turned to it many times, and I think you will too. I highly recommend Crazy Brave. I also encourage you, if you'd like to know more about Joy, she has her website, joyharjo.com, and she has a terrific interview on YouTube on PBS NewsHour. So that's all I have. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Joe about Joy Harjo's Crazy Brave or anything else that he's talked about? You can put that in the chat or in the Q&A portion of the Zoom. I have a question while we're waiting to see if any of the attendees have one. Do you have a favorite poem by Joy?
I do. Funny you should ask that. And it was one that I did not know, and it's in this book. It's called Eagle Poem.
Eagle poem.
It's in the book.
Awesome. Okay, let's see. Peggy from the audience says, thank you for your informal, interesting presentation. I have read the book twice. I'm now getting ready to read it again. Totally agree about rereading passages. We'll check out YouTube. How do you interpret the title?
You know, I knew somebody was going to ask that. I think that of course, you know, it's very individual interpretation. to me, it means that you have to be brave to live in this world. It's not that anyone's story is so remarkable compared to the rest of us. We all have remarkable stories, and we're all part of one story. And so I think there's a level of bravery that is just, we learn as we go. And I think that's what she means by being crazy brave. If you look at it too logically, if you listen to your mind before your heart, you're going to have trouble. The heart is the doorway to the mind, that's crazy brave.
Let's see. So I haven't gotten any other questions yet, but I have gotten a few comments. Carla loves the background behind you, your bookshelf. Lots of neat stuff on there, and several people saying that they enjoyed your presentation and that you did a wonderful job.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate you all being with me. I enjoyed the time very much.
Yeah, this is lovely. I mean, the cozy, rainy weather and your very interesting talk is a wonderful combination.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Somebody said, wish this one could have been in person. I agree. It's great that we're able to meet virtually, but it's a little different from having an in-person event. Someone asked if you went to high school with Joy.
Joy is about 3 or 4 years younger than I am.
Okay. So you just missed each other.
So we just missed each other. She did not graduate from Rogers, by the way. She graduated from the Art Institute.
Gotcha. Okay. Just seeing if any last minute questions pop up. Somebody wants
I'm curious,
to know.
whoever asked about that title, I wonder if that person has an insight to the title.
Let's see. So the person who asked that was Peggy. So Peggy, if you have any insights into what you think the title means, feel free to put those in the chat so we can share it with the rest of the group. Let's see. Somebody wants to know, did Joy have siblings? Or does Joy have siblings?
She had a brother and I believe a sister. Her biography is pretty available. But I know she had a brother, and I believe she had a sister also, if I remember correctly. And I saw there that I believe somebody asked about her daughter, Rainy Dawn. She also has a son, and as far as I know, they're well.
So Peggy, who asked about the title, says your interpretation was better than hers. I was just considering both as adjectives. I wasn't looking at it as a directive to lie.
Interesting.
Somebody else has asked if you know where folks can go to see some of Joy's artwork.
I do not. She does not seem to make a big deal about that nowadays. So I don't know if she paints any longer, but on her website and so forth, that's not anything that's readily available.
It's interesting.
We should get her to do a show, shouldn't we?
Yeah, I would love to have an exhibition of her work at the library. I feel like artwork and painting is so closely related to poetry in a way, sure. Even though they're both different mediums, but I feel like there's some similarities there for sure. Let's see. Somebody says the perspective of the four directions is poetic in itself.
Well, I like that comment. A lot of people talk about angels, guardian angels, and that sort of thing, and other cultures talk about spirits, helpful spirits, and that sort of thing. So I've always thought that if you ever think anything that you encounter in Native American beliefs and practices doesn't jive with your particular faith, I think if you open up your thinking on that, you'll find that they're not very different at all. And so if you think that in a Native American way, in an indigenous way. We have teachers in all the directions. And sometimes you'll also hear about 6 directions or 7, above and below and inside. So if you believe that we have angels in those directions, then you can believe that we have spiritual teachers in those directions. It's not really different.
That's fascinating. Somebody has asked to hear more about Joy's band.
I beg your pardon?
Her band.
Yeah.
Do you know much about her band?
I do not. And I don't think, of course, with the pandemic on, nobody's playing music, so that's unfortunate. But she did play in 2019 at the Tulsa Jazz Hall of Fame. So this is not something that's in her past. It's something that she still does. And hopefully we'll see some more performances from her when things loosen up.
She is truly a creative powerhouse. I mean, that's like all of the big creative mediums, right?
Those jazz shows with reciting poetry, and she also plays the flute, Native American flute, and the sax.
That's
really
amazing.
Cool.
Somebody says, we have some observations in the chat. Someone says that they can see your book on the shelf behind you.
How handy.
So, did you want to share the title of that with everyone?
This is Grits to Glory, How Southern Cooking Got So Good. It's published by Pelican Press, and it was a lot of fun to write. It's all about the history of Southern cooking.
Awesome.
Why we eat grits and people up north don't.
They're missing out.
Why they eat, why they eat chocolate and we eat apple pie.
Whoa. Apple pie sounds good right now.
It really does, doesn't it?
It does. Let's see. Somebody just noted, Tara noted that the alumni of Rogers has a great reputation. Are there more famous Rogers alumni? I'm not from Oklahoma, so I don't know as much about some of the luminaries around here.
We have quite a few. We have a Tulsa mayor and a state senator, and oh my gosh, of course, Leon Russell and Gaylord Sartain. You know who Gaylord is?
I don't.
Well,
I'll look him up.
he was Mazeppa back in the old days. Anyway, there are a lot of them, and you can actually find them online. We have a foundation that supports the school because Oklahoma public schools and Tulsa schools really can't keep up with the school's needs these days, and the Will Rogers High School Community Foundation supports the school, and we maintain the Hall of Fame. So that's on the website, the Will Rogers High School Hall of Fame. It's pretty impressive.
And you're on there, so that's exciting. Somebody wants to know how Joy got to the Art Institute. Did she apply or was she contacted by someone there?
Her mother helped her apply. Her mother was the kind of mother who would put on a record, back when there were records, put a record on the record player and grab Joy's hands and dance around the house. She recognized Joy's creativity, and that's largely how she was able to survive and flourish in a home with an alcoholic father and an abusive stepfather. And so, yeah, her mother helped her get into the Art Institute.
Wow. Let's see. People are naming more famous alumni of Rogers.
Mary Kay Place went to Hale High School.
Oh, okay.
With Gary Busey.
Wow. Let's see. Just another very nice comment. Joy Harjo is indeed a great gift to our country, and it's an honor to have her from Tulsa. So much appreciation for your unfolding of her gifts.
Yeah, I think it's great that she has traveled all over and she chose to come back to Oklahoma to live. She's basically spent her life here, even though, for example, she was at Vanderbilt in Nashville, I think for a year, maybe it was longer. but she's had plenty of opportunity to live wherever she wants, and she chose to come back to Oklahoma to live. She has an office, by the way, in the Library of Congress. The poet laureate gets an office there.
Wow. So how long does her term as poet laureate last?
It lasts for 1 year, but they renewed her. So she is I'm glad you asked that question. Very good question. Her term would have been up in August, but they renewed her for another year. And I'm sure that's partly because of the pandemic. She was super booked. Everybody wanted to hear from her, and she was booked all over the country. And of course, all that ended in March.
Well,
So she will be poet laureate for another year. And hopefully she'll be able to get out and travel more.
I hope so. There are a lot of people who would benefit from hearing her speak.
By the way, I'll just mention this since we're just chatting here. There was a time when there were no native poets. We had native languages, we had English, and there was little translation between the ways of thought and the ways of expression. And now there are a lot of native poets, just like there are a lot of great native artists, painters, and musicians coming on the scene. So she's part of something really significant among Indigenous people and among Oklahomans.
Do you have any other favorite Indigenous poets that you'd like to share with the audience?
I don't know them like she does. I'd be hesitant to speak on that.
Fair enough. Let's see. Will Joe Johnston review more books for the Friends of the Library? Someone wants to know.
Sure, if they're not over my head,
Well,
sure, would love to do that.
I speak for everyone, I think, when I say you did a wonderful job today. It was very good, and your speaking style is very engaging.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm sorry for the technical trouble. I thought I had that all figured out. Maybe I clicked the wrong button someplace, but we'll fix it next time, hopefully.
I very rarely had a virtual program where there wasn't at least one technical issue.
Good point. We're in the era of Zoom, so welcome to it, right?
Yeah, exactly. You just got to roll with the punches at this point.
That's right.
Yes, and you're getting a lot more kudos and thanks in the chat as we speak.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
All right. Well, our time is running short, and it doesn't look like there are any more questions at the moment. Well, I just want to thank you, Joe, for joining us today and for your wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Rebecca.
We'll be back next week with another great presentation, and I hope to see you all there. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day and manages to stay dry out there.
Thank you. Wado.
Bye-bye.